Time being 2:15, quarter after the hour. We're back in session. Quorum is present. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn the microphone back over to Commissioner DiGiulio, who initially outlined 4 main points that came out of the subcommittee meeting for technology that require some consensus this meeting. So I'd like to turn it back over here and focus the conversation on those 4 items.
Okay, I think in an effort to try and move the process forward and hopefully be able to move on from technology and move into talking the specifics about the outreach, I think it would be helpful for the technology committee to have agreement from the commission on moving ahead with, first of all, the first one would be to move ahead with the educational meetings. And hopefully those can be completed in March.
I think that's a useful thing, and I actually, during the break, I asked Karen if she had an estimate of what that would cost us. And so, with your consent, I would like to ask her to give us an outline of what those educational meetings would cost.
Okay, the educational meetings are going to be a real bargain for you because the Irvine Foundation has already paid for most of them. So we had, as part of the contract to do the outreach centers, we actually had an educational piece in there. And we had envisioned doing 4 more regional workshops, as we called them, I think, in the proposal. And they're very similar to, in scope and in design, to what we're talking about here. So if we can collaborate with CCP, then pretty much 4 of them are already paid for. And I would say, and I have one caveat, which is I'm not sure if we spent the travel money on used furniture for the centers, because this is all the kind of not so well-funded center issue. And I also have an additional supplemental budget request into Irvine. So, if we get more money from Irvine, obviously you don't have to pay for it. But in addition, if we do so for each additional workshop, I would say in terms of staff costs, not more than $3,000.
Okay, now that would be your cost, correct?
That's the technical
cost. Do we have an estimate, or do you have an estimate, or does staff have an estimate of what the CCP component would add to that for the additional 4 meetings?
I think they're going, I believe if you wouldn't mind holding off, I think they're going to do a presentation on that, just very briefly, and they have a very detailed proposal for the
for just educational meetings?
For educational meetings, input meetings, and general costs.
Right, I understand that, but I'm asking just for the education meetings.
It's in your handout.
Is it there?
Oh, no.
For just the education component? No. Oh, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Anchetta?
Yeah, Karen, just for clarity's sake, I know you wear different hats, and depending on which hats, and obviously they're closely related, so just for clarity's sake, obviously you've got the statewide database, which is a state agency, and then you have your consulting company. And I want to be, I think other people would like to be clear too about when it's a statewide database activity versus a contract with your company. And the issue that's related to this, and I think it's been raised in written public comments, is because of the collaborative that Irvine is founding, and some concerns, not universally shared, but some concerns in the public that based on certain organizations who will do advocacy work regarding certain types of maps, that there may need to be some distinctions or lines drawn in terms of the different members of the collaborative. But again, that's a larger discussion, but I want to be clear about where it's the statewide database that's doing certain things, and you, as a contractor, are doing certain things, and where those costs are eventually showing up. Just so we're clear about where they pop up.
If I may interject as chair on that matter, that's a question that's excellent, but is addressed at a later time. Right now, we can address that under contracting and other issues. Okay. Right now, we're trying to stay on point 1 of the subcommittee's.
Oh, no, I understand that, but because I really am not. When you said it's already paid for,
I could do it in 1 minute. I could do it in 1 minute very quickly.
By all means,
I'm standing here on vacation time from the statewide database. So when I'm here talking to you, I am not on the statewide database. The statewide database actually also does not work on the Irvine piece. We kind of separated that out because that was a grant, and we call it the Redistricting Group at Berkeley Law. So the statewide database really does like data provision, and that's really all we do. We do not do redistricting consulting there. We do not do anything else but really just database, giving data to the public and helping them just kind of access the data. So when we got this grant from Irvine, we founded the redistricting group at Berkeley Law because we moved over to Berkeley Law about a year and a half ago. And there are some people from the Warren Institute that are part of the redistricting group and all of that. So basically when we're doing the outreach centers and also that educational piece, that's Berkeley Law. And this is kind of the reality of being at a university where you have to rely on soft money and you have to kind of just bring in, various grants or projects to be able to keep your people employed on some level. I have done redistricting consulting. I'm staff at Berkeley, and staff at Berkeley has no limitations on doing any kind of outside business. Okay, and I've verified that various times. Most recently, 3 weeks ago, so I have that in writing actually from the law school. And so when we're doing consulting, like right now when I'm standing here, this has really nothing to do with that. I'm really educating you about what's going on at the redistricting group at Berkeley piece, because that's going to save you some money, and because also I've engaged in a dialogue with the Irvine Foundation, and they're very interested in working with the Commission, because not only does that save money, but it also really helps us all be on the same page and really get more people engaged. So I've been very, very clear on which hat I am wearing, and I actually really appreciate the question. And if you want to know more, I will tell you all about it.
Yeah, and again, I was sort of losing track of some of
it's
that.
there.
I just wanted...
Oh, I should say one more thing. I actually just hired the manager for the Berkeley Redistricting Center. She came on today's her first day. Well, I worked with her last night, and she's actually going to be supervising the other centers. So I will have very little to do with the supervision of the other centers. And that's Tamina Alon, and she's sitting in the office now.
So can I go back to, again, does that answer your question too? Okay. I think maybe this question will be raised at the end. It's my fourth point in regards to our actual contracting with consultants. But going back to the first one, can we agree as a commission that starting these educational meetings is the first task at hand? Are you comfortable with setting those up for the technical committee to go ahead and do that?
Michelle.
I think I'm along with Commissioner Forbes. What is the total cost for the educational meeting? Does anyone have that number? I mean, we're about to approve something to start in the process that we can't backtrack, okay? And if I don't know what that total cost is, I have the partial cost that was identified from the podium. If you said that I have to wait until further to find out what the rest of the cost is, I don't know how I'm going to vote on this.
Can I suggest that we could limit it to saying that we would like to go ahead with the educational meeting so that we can task the consultants with developing a schedule that can be presented to us at our next meeting, so we would get the schedule and the cost associated with that to some degree. Would that alleviate?
Is it helpful if what I understand that she's asking, and I could be wrong, is she's asking us if we are interested in having these training meetings. They don't want to put together a plan and a budget, a cost proposal for meetings that we don't even want. So they're just looking to, from what I understand, is you're just simply asking, do we as a commission want to engage in a educational meeting process? If we do, then what they would like to do is put together a proposal for how much those would cost and so forth, so much and so forth. So that would be forthcoming. Where I don't believe you're asking us to approve a expenditure for these training meetings to happen at this time. Is that correct?
It's my understanding that the only one that we have tentatively scheduled would be for February 26th. But beyond that, we haven't developed a schedule. And I do think we are running into the issue of having enough time to agendize things. So I think if we had something in our hands at the next meeting in terms of actual schedule as well as a scope of work and a budget, then we could make that decision. I know it's a bit of a horse before the cart before the horse here. I do think maybe Karen could she's given a little bit of the numbers on her part, and I guess the question, do we want to get into the numbers on CCP, and there may be some, as you saw on this, there's a lot of elements. If you looked on that flow chart, there are a lot of different people that don't have their numbers here. We won't have the number for CCE if we want to have the logistical aspects of it. We don't have it if we need translation, interpretation services, things along those lines. There's some questions we may not be able to answer right now in terms of budget, but I think if we want to move on with this, we should just have agreement if we want to do these educational meetings.
Commissioner Rea.
We were handed a document a few minutes ago, and this is another draft, and it includes, I know that's somebody else's document, but the difficulty I'm having, I think, is the same. I think I'm kind of echoing Commissioner Yao. We're trying to keep this in some kind of like compartmentalized consideration, but it doesn't really work because, it doesn't work for me, I'll just say that. Because we have some numbers, and we were given another number, and I don't know. It is difficult to say. In concept, yes, everybody wants to do the educational workshops, but I think somehow I need things to mesh a little bit more.
Commissioner Barla.
Yeah, my concern is that here we are in February, and it's going to be very soon before we have to start drawing some maps. If we have to have the exact cost of everything we're going to do before we authorize it, we're not going to make it. Now, we have spent a lot of time finding the executive director with experience in this area. It seems to me we should be directing him to get a contract put in place that makes sense within the law and all the other procedures that we have. This first part is going to be the least amount of money we're going to spend. And we can't get going unless we get it started. So I would suggest we have some confidence in our executive director to hammer out a contract that we'll be proud of and get the thing going.
Mr. Claypool.
Yes, I think it's important, and I have a sense of where Commissioner DiGiulio wants this to go. And what we're talking about here is having a presentation by each one of these entities to say, for my part, this is what it would cost. Yesterday when we spoke, or when I actually spoke with the Finance Committee, I said, what we're looking at right here is trying to get an estimate of what this core is going to cost us. So we could spend a lot of time right now saying, so for the outreach within the meeting, CCP is going to charge us this amount, and for the part that we would get from the statewide database will be this piece, and then as a consultancy we would get this piece, and try to mesh that. But that, I think, is what we're aiming at for our next meeting. What we're looking for right now is to say, in principle, we agree that we want to have these outreach meetings. And then when we come to you at the next meeting, we're going to say, this is the field of the scope of work that we're talking about. This is the cost. These are what these will cost you. I don't believe that we're asking right now you are not approving the payment for these services or anything else. You're simply approving that scope of work that you believe needs to be done. And then at our next meeting, we'll be talking about, is this the scope of work is this what we can agree to pay for this scope of work? That's what I think we're shooting for right here. Then what you're looking for, are you talking about just the educational component, or are you talking about the whole input component as well right now?
I think what I was going to break it down into asking for first of all, to separate them. Are you okay to move forward with the educational meetings? If so, in theory, we can ask the consultants then to come back with a detailed scope of work based on the 7 educational meetings. My next question was going to be regarding the scheduling of the public input hearings and what I need to get from the full commission in order to move forward. And that would be those are just these 2 things.
Okay, let me then, and I think, I agree with Commissioner Barabbas, we can't wait but so long for this. And so I think, personally, I would support that we make a decision to go forward with the educational meetings, and at our next meetings in Sacramento, you'll come back with a projected cost of that part of our outreach program. I also think that as we look at all these potential meetings, there's 27 meetings or 36 meetings or however many there are, I think it would be very helpful for me personally to have a schedule for the next 2 to 3 months set out without regard to whether we can make them Because I think to try and work our schedule is impossible. I think we have to come up with a schedule. This is where we're going to be, or we're going to try to be on these dates, and it's up to us to be there. And some of us will be, and some of us won't. And that's just the way the chips fall. But I think to try and massage our schedules with these, I think that's an impossible task. So those would be my 2 recommendations for the our next business meeting.
And I believe that we are talking about the same thing. What you are looking for is structure for where we're going. And I believe that the outcome of this session has to be an agreement as to what that structure should look like. It's exactly what Commissioner DiGiulio just outlined. We need to have an agreement as to what our outreach plan is going to look like. We have to have an agreement as to what we think our public input process is going to be. And then we have to have some agreement as to what we're going to do regionally when we're finished with our final maps and so forth. So as a commission, I believe that you are putting these pieces together. We've already talked about needing to get the cost estimates for the Voting Rights Act attorneys. We're talking about putting together contingency. I've spoken earlier about needing the cost for staff. All of this has to come together so that we can come back to you at the next session and say, this is the price tag for this effort. And that will then give us the information we need to go to the Department of Finance and to go to the legislature and say, please release the money that's in the budget. We already have this, and this is what we need additionally. And I think that each one of these contractors is doing a very good job for us by breaking it down by meeting and by breaking down the components. If we don't, for some reason, get that money, then we know where we have to scale back to. But the first thing I think we need to know is, in your collective mind, in your vision, what do you think it looks like at the level you think it should be as a process? We're going to work those numbers for you, and part of it will be exactly what you're saying. This many meetings. Now, will we have them scheduled out that way by the next session? I don't think so. I don't think that we can say you'll be in Watsonville on March 23rd. But we do know from a process standpoint that you have the expectation of doing this many meetings, and that's something that we can then plan around. And that's what I think Commissioner DiGiulio is looking to put into place.
Commissioner Aguirre's next, but I was in line. I wanted to go ahead and make a motion at this point that we propose that we agree in principle to have training meetings and direct staff to solicit proposals for options on how to make that happen, to include budget and other concerns.
I would be in support of the motion, and I would second that motion by further stating that we're trying to come to an agreement, conceptual, on the concept itself, agreement on the concept, and that concept includes us deciding that we're going to go out there and we're going to say this is what we're all about. Then we're going to go out there again and say we're here before, so now we need information, some input from you. We'll be back, going out again and saying, all right, we heard you. This is kind of where we're going. And then coming back, doing that work, and then going back and saying, this is what we came up with. You got 14 days or whatever to give us some final input, because on this day we're going to get, that's the concept. That's the concept, right? So I think the request is, can we agree on that concept? I think it's pretty simple. As far as the money goes, even though Karen has not given us any figures at this point, I think with the outreach committee, the documents that they will be presenting certainly outlines, what the money angle is going to be on that particular process, which is more than $3,000, certainly, right? So, but anyway, so I would second that motion.
In light of your input, I'm actually going to withdraw my motion, and I'm going to ask Commissioner DiGiulio to please make a motion based off of what the request of the subcommittee is at this time.
Okay. Let's see. I'd like to make a motion that the commission agree in concept to the educational meetings so that the consultants can develop a proposal for our further consideration at our next meeting.
Okay, we have the stated proposal on the table. At this point, further panel discussion? Ms. Shiao?
I'm sensitive to the schedule. I'm sensitive to all the work that's ahead of us. But I'm afraid that we're taking a very bad approach to this. There's no such thing as getting a little pregnant. What we're about to do is enter into an exclusive contract. Now, hear me out. Once you started with a single contract to initiate the work, we're going to burn up more schedule. We're going to be at a point where we can't do anything else, okay? And we haven't seen any cost data. We haven't seen any other options. And based on the fact that we need to do it, we need to proceed with or without data. So again, I'm not voting against the fact that we need to move ahead immediately, but I'm voting against the fact that we're taking a very bad process.
Commissioner Yao, we have a proposed process. And I'm open. To an alternative, but I haven't heard one. What alternative proposal would you make?
Could I suggest that, Commissioner Yao, I'd like to reserve the last point of discussion for the actual consulting with any type of agency. So right now it has nothing to do with an individual agency. It's simply whether or not we'd like to proceed along this line.
I was just going to ask, before we take a vote, should we have public input?
If we can get through the commission input. Once again, I think it's just important to wrap all this, summarize again. A lot of good debate. The overall understanding is that we're trying to vote on a concept, a skeleton for what it is the commission envisions and on getting our job done. At that point, staff would like to take that vision, that outline, that roadmap that we're trying to create this week, and then put faces and contracts and things like that to that later. But we can't go anywhere until we agree as a commission on what we want to do, how we want to get the job done. And I think that's the overriding principle that we're trying to accomplish today.
Yes, it seems to me that what we're doing here is, do we want to have, to use the right terminology, educational background meetings? Nothing more. The answer to that is yes. Then we can direct staff to discuss with the people who have expressed an interest or anybody else. And that we can come back to the next meeting.
And I believe that's the motion that's on the floor. Mr. Claypool.
I am very sensitive to Commissioner Yao's thoughts here. And I think that this has all come about because now we are talking about moving out of the realm of what was originally proposed, which was working through interagency agreements to work with state agencies. And so I think that what we have to do as part of this is we have to come together as a commission and agree that we want to have a structure that looks like that. And then as Commissioner DiGiulio, I think, is indicating, when we get to the end where we actually talk about the consultant contracts that go with this type of an effort, we have to discuss then, we have to reevaluate how we're going to approach having this last piece put into place. If it is a matter of having to go through a consultant contract to do it, then we may just have to go through the competitive bid process, or we may have to investigate what other alternatives we have. But that, I think, would, it's something that now that we have this concept of going beyond or going outside of the state process and government code, there's a process in place to do just that, and we just have to investigate it. But that won't in any way, I think, take away from the structure itself. It only addresses how we address each of the pieces within that structure. That's all.
let's go forward a few weeks, assuming this is February 26th. We would have seen what the proposed package is. Let's say the package is more than we can afford, okay? What options do we have in February 26th other than accept it and move forward? Because we lost schedule and we can't afford to go anywhere else. So that's what I mean by locking ourselves into a position where we can't do anything else. And by making a decision before, even if I add up the draft data that's here, even if I add up the data that's before me, I'm not sure I'm seeing the total cost. What's the facility cost for the 7 meetings? Are there any conflicts between what the Irvine Foundation and us? Do they have a right to veto anything that we want to say? I mean, I haven't seen anything that convinced me that this really is the only option that we have, other than the fact that we're running out of time. So I think I said all I need to say.
Again, I think your comments are fantastic, Commissioner. They're very fair concerns, and I think they're concerns we all share. I just think that what the motion on the floor is asking is simply, do we want to have training meetings? That's it. Now, as I understood the motion stated, all we're trying to agree on is that. If we can't agree on that, then where are we going to be on February 27th would be the logical question.
I guess I would like the motion restated because that's not what I understand the motion to be.
Very good. Let's do that. Could we have the motion on the floor restated? Michelle?
Can I suggest that can you restate it? Since apparently Commissioner Yao understood it better from you than for me.
As I understand the motion on the floor, it is motioned that the Commission agree in principle to host educational training seminars. Do I get a second?
That is not what I heard the first time.
I was focusing simply on the educational workshops.
And there was an and after that.
Oh, was it?
And that we would ask our consultants to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess if we agreed in principle for that we would hold the educational workshops, that would give the parameters for the consultants then to give to us a scope of work. Is that?
Let me restate my motion. My motion is to agree in principle that we as a commission desire to have training workshops. End of motion. There's no addition to that as far as moving forward and conducting them, as far as agreeing to pay any amount for them or anything else. Just simply that in principle, we would like to have an educational workshop.
Point of order. Commissioner DeJulia already make a motion?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's correct.
Do I need to clarify it a little bit more?
Well, no. I think I understood your motion. If the motion were, in fact, do we agree to have educational workshops? Why would anybody have a problem with that? And if we do that, and then subsequently give direction to staff to get proposals, scope of work, and so on, and cost, I don't have a problem with that either.
For the consideration for the full commission at the next meeting. That's the purpose of this motion.
And I would expand that comment that Commissioner Rea just mentioned, that in putting the cost together, it's the cost that includes both consultants, Koreans and CCPs.
Well, and again, I'm just saying, this is where I have a problem, is if you say it's only in concept, great. Nobody can object to that. But it's what comes after that I still have a problem with. And I would, if it's really to approve in concept, and then subsequent to assuming that motion passes, and I'm sure it would, giving direction to staff, because otherwise, to me, the motion sounds like, okay, we've already said these are the consultants, these are the people, and that's the concern I have.
It's just the concept of the workshops, so that we can take that under consideration for the next meeting, and then we can make the decision as to where, if we go forward.
Can I make a suggestion, Commissioner DiGiulio? Would you mind withdrawing your motion?
Sure. I withdraw.
And may I ask Commissioner Rea to propose a motion?
Well, my motion would be to approve the concept of educational workshops.
I second that. Oh.
Okay, that's it.
Oh, that doesn't take us where we need to go for our next. No, we still need to have staff work with the numbers to provide that information to us at the next meeting. So that motion I disagree with, unfortunately.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can we call the question?
Pardon?
Can we vote on the motion?
Any other panel discussion on this motion on the floor that we have educational workshops?
Could I ask for it to be amended? Do we want to, in concept, have it be for 7, a number associated with that, not just in concept?
I have no problem with the number.
Okay. To amend it just to give it an actual number in concept that we would have 7 educational workshops.
So have an amended, is that seconded? Is there a second on that? She's proposing an amended motion that we have educational meeting workshops in the number of 7. We agree to 7. Okay. So that motion is seconded and is on the table. Any other panel discussion before we turn over to public comment?
I do have a concern. That's a clear motion that we all agree with. It's a given that we all agree that we want to have educational workshops. I mean, it's a motion that really is an absolute agreement. It's unanimous, I think. I think what's pertinent is that time is running out on us, and for the month of March. I mean, it's only 2 weeks away, literally. And to not have staff work with the consultants to bring back some set of numbers in terms of costs and for these 7 meetings, I think we're missing a very big piece of what we need to accomplish over the next 2 weeks. So I'm not clear if this motion is actually putting our efforts into motion so that we'll have something concrete at our next meeting.
Commissioner Parvenu, I would suggest that once this motion passes, as it will, that you make a motion to do just that, direct staff to do just that. That'd be my suggestion.
Takes us right back to the earlier motion that Commissioner DiGiulio proposed earlier, which opened this whole kind of discussion.
Thank you for the comment. Any other comment on the panel?
I move to limit debate on this motion.
Okay. Well, at this point, I'd like to open up to the public for any public input regarding the motion on the floor only. Thank you.
Hi, this is Kathy Fung. I am glad that you're opening this up to public comment. I do have some thoughts, and I think that time is very short, and you all are up against not only a hard timeline, but also a hard resource reality. And if I had to think about over the course of the next few months what your main focus has to be, the main focus has to be the public input phase. And it also has to be the next phase after that, which is taking comment as you adjust the maps that you proposed. And so it is hard to say this because I think that public education is really important, but I do think that one thing that you may want to consider is, given how limited your time and resources are, and how hard it is to figure out when and where you all can be in the same room for a meeting, that with regard to the public input phase, you should be focused on getting those times and dates nailed down to a T, not 10 day phases, but to a T. I'm going to be in this city or this town on these dates. And then during this education phase, it may be useful to think about an alternative to 7 workshops, which is to create a single video that is available online and DVD that organizations can run like crazy with and show in many, many more locations than 7, that is official, that has maybe a welcome message from several of you, that also has the official presentation on what the pieces are that people need to know, maybe has a navigational tool that allows you to jump when you've had enough of a particular section but you want to get to another section. I don't think that video needs to be terribly long. We've done long workshops for a whole day, but I do believe that a workshop in about 1 to 2 hours is what you need. And a video that runs about that long is about what you need, because that's about what people will stand. Regular folks who are not diehard, sitting in the hearing, listening to this all day. So I think just with regard to that, I think that a simpler way may be, and it may be useful to at least have some apples to compare with, whatever other fruit you're considering. And I would also suggest that there's a number of materials, outreach materials that groups have created, that I think many groups would be happy to share the content of, that would allow the commission to tweak as you need to, but frankly, crib as much as you want to, because I do think that time is of the essence and you don't need to recreate a lot of these things. For the content of the video, much of that also exists, but it may be that you want to create something fresh, particularly with your own stamp. That may be a way of resolving both the time issues and also, frankly, the money issues. And I think that a lot of organizations would run with it in a way that gives you much broader reach than what you could achieve even with 7 outreach, and allows the staff to focus on what's really important, which is the public input hearings. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Jim Wright. Kathy's got an interesting thought there, which triggered my thinking. What you've been talking about is a nice to have. It's not a necessary. Training the public can be done by a lot of other organizations, and many organizations that are willing to do a lot of that as well. Prepare their people to give you testimony. Time's running out. The thing you need to do, and do as quickly as possible, is to start to gather input from the public, from the organizations that want to challenge the current maps, are ready to help direct you as to what you should do with your maps. As I said, this is doing a training, you sponsoring training of the public is a nice to have, not a necessary. Let's get on with the rest of the task. Secondly, if I may offer a criticism to the commission, and that is, please clear your private calendars.
I'm sorry, sir. We'll have to take the rest of that comment in open session. We'll only take comments about the motion on the floor, and yours were excellent.
That's
Thank
fine.
you for your information.
Thank you.
Corinne, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Let's take a vote on the motion on the floor. If you're in favor of the motion, raise your hand and say yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Sorry. I had hoped we would have a chance to discuss it one more time after the public comment. I tend to agree with members of the public. We had talked before about, really leveraging other resources to do the educational pieces.
Very good. Would anyone like to reconsider their vote at this time? Any abstentions?
I think it's a point of clarification. My vote is that to support that we do outreach. It's not in any particular format. If that's not a correct understanding of what the vote was, I apologize, because I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to move on. We agree that we're going to have 7 outreach meetings. I think we can decide on the format, whether it's video, whether one person goes, whether and I would like to work with our executive director on that piece. But perhaps that wasn't the motion as other people understood it.
Yeah, I think the motion was actually for educational workshops in 7 locations. So it's not video. It's not a DVD. It's not.
Well, if I'm correct, the motion was put to the floor and voted on at this point. But just for the commission's sake, I'd just like to have it restated. The motion was moved that we agree in principle to having 7 educational workshops.
Can I?
The commission conducts? Correct.
Can I suggest that I put out an additional motion that we also, in concept, agree to doing educational meetings and a video to exploring additional formats for educational meetings, so that we can have one proposal that comes to us that discusses the actual physical 7 locations of educational meetings, and another proposal that, if I put another motion on for another proposal, that would include educational workshops in another format other than physical meetings? Or is that just confusing the issue too much?
No, I think that we should do that, and I would second that. I was actually going to propose that be considered be part of this direction to staff, but I think as a motion as a separate entity is a good thing, and I'll second that motion.
I just want to comment on Commissioner Dai's comment. Yes, I think we have a number of organizations that we see as partners, and they'll be helping us to send out educational materials and having their own separate forums. But I think the 7 meetings, educational meetings that this commission would do under this motion would also be a test period for us to experiment with the 2 consultants on how they would work together and how actually they would put such a plan together. So it's a forerunner for phase 2 and phase 3.
Also in response to Commissioner Dai's concerns, I see the responsibility of an education workshop sponsored, for lack of a better word, from this commission to be very important, so that the public understands that there is a manner that these consultants are suggesting that the public needs to present information to this commission. I don't believe that if this commission relies on private sources providing information to the public regarding the training to the public about how they need to present information to us, I know everybody that's out there, true, but I don't know what information they're providing to the public. But at least if we agree to these educational workshops that are being proposed and offered by this commission, I feel comfortable that we put something together that instructed the public regarding the manner in which they would present information to us that would be reliable. Because we can't go back later and say, well, we just expected Common Cause would get out there and teach the public the right way to do it, and when in actuality the public wasn't properly informed about the manner in which the information should be provided to us. Because certainly, once we have an opportunity to hold the input hearings, I mean, that's what everybody is talking about is important. We need to make sure that they come to us appropriately and submit the information to us appropriately. So we should be charged with the responsibility of educating the public, so that at a later time, if we need to draw these lines and make decisions regarding certain areas, if the public didn't provide us the information in the manner in which we could use it, after we've already instructed and provided education to them about how we need to be informed, we need to do it to the best of our ability. And so I think we are charged with the responsibility to advise the public regarding the manner in which this information should be presented to us.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we have a motion on the floor. It's fantastic comments, but they're regarding a decision that's been made and moved past at this point. So let's go ahead and have a restating of the motion that's on the floor and move forward.
I'd like to make a motion that we also consider other formats for educational meetings, such as video online postings, so that I'd like to consider options for other formats for educational meetings.
Is this, may we just direct staff to do that? Is that, pardon? Okay, so we have a second on that motion? Okay, very good. Any further discussion from the panel? Commissioner Yap.
Question. Does this involve committing any amount of money to pursue the output that we're expecting the next time we meet?
My motion was simply to be able to provide parameters for any consultants to, if we would like to know what the cost of this is, we have to be able to tell them the commission we'd like to task you with giving us the money, the budgetary requirements for doing, whether it be the 7 educational meetings or the actual other formats for educational meetings.
For example, this might be a how-to video on the website, which I think would get a far wider distribution than 7 locations.
So we would be simply, this motion would be simply agreeing that we would like to look into that as an option, and we would like to get feedback from consultants as to what those elements would be and what the cost associated for other formats of educational meetings.
Commissioner Ontai.
So the answer to the question is no.
Correct.
So the answer to the question is no.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second to pursue a motion that we will look into other and all media vehicles by which to conduct these training sessions. Is that an accurate restatement of your motion?
Yes.
Okay, and it's been seconded. Mr. Claypool has a comment.
I just have a question, not a comment. So my question is, I heard staff will look into this. So, okay, am I correct or incorrect?
I think that we're going to try and have staff work with consultants, task consultants, to provide the scope of work for us. There's 2 options for educational meetings that we proposed. One are the physical meetings and one are the other options. So it will be staff to work with consultants to give us the scope of work.
And the only clarification I would ask is, would we then work through the technical committee before we come back? I just want to make sure that we know the route we're supposed to take with this information, because I know, so we would work through the technical committee, am I correct?
I think there's a conjunction between technical and outreach, but maybe let's be the point person for now.
Okay.
Thank you also for that clarification. I needed to hear that point was added. Thanks.
At this point, I'd like to open the microphone to the public who might have any comments directly related to the issue of exploring other vehicles and all vehicles for conducting training workshops. Seeing no one moving to the microphone, I'd like to take a vote on this motion. If you're in favor, please raise your hand and say yes. Yes. All opposed? Any abstentions? And so moved.
Okay.
Chair Ward.
Congratulations, everyone, on getting the educational workshops under our belt. Now let's move on. If I can,
I think Commissioner Yao has a point of order.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me try to make another motion, which I think will push our costs a little further than what the first 2 motions that we did. I think if we simply come back in February and start looking at proposals, we would have slipped our schedule even further. But I still have concern about proving something that we don't have complete data on. So the motion I'm about to make is to approve an expenditure not to exceed, let's say, $100,000, so that we can have a package that's a training package, whether we do it ourselves or whether we go out and solicit partners to deliver the training package and stay on the training schedule that's been previously approved. Okay. The difference between what I just proposed and the very initial proposal was that the very initial proposal, I couldn't see a maximum number to the expenditure because no one is willing to commit to any number. But the proposal I'm making is that at least there's a cap on it, and I know that we're not going to exceed it. And I think that'll give the subcommittee and staff and anybody that's interested in making progress with the training the flexibility to move forward at the pace that we want to move. So that's the motion I'm putting before the group.
Can I suggest, because I do think this is an important issue that Commissioner Yao is raising, but I think I think our legal counsel has something to say about contracts and in how we can do those and the limitations and monetary and structure. So can I propose that we postpone that and have Mr. Miller discuss that after we get one more item of business regarding the technical committee under our belt? Would you feel comfortable with that, Commissioner Yao?
I'd like to just, real quick, I'm sorry, as Chair, just see if there's even a second that we need to table that for. Is there a second for Commissioner Yao's motion? Not hearing any second at this time, we'll move forward with the subcommittee agenda.
Okay. Again, I'd like to just move on to the public input hearings. And in a similar manner, I think I'm going to ask for two things to be considered by this commission, and maybe more based on our discussion. But what it would be, again, it's in a conceptual basis, if we have to have an agreement of how we'd like to move forward. So again, we can ask our consultants to come forward with an actual hard schedule for these public input hearings. So in order to give them whoever the consultant may be, in order to give them the parameters, I'd like the commission first to discuss. Let me back up. As I understand it, our intention is to try and have at least 3 commissioners at a meeting and a public input hearing with the option of getting as many as possible that can actually attend. The next question is if the commission agrees on the concept of the 9 regions and having at least one meeting for each phase within those 9 regions, if we could at least have an idea of the number of meetings we'd like to start off with so we could have a hard schedule presented to us. I think as the public input has suggested, we need to actually have some meetings down on paper that we could look at and say, yes, we agree to, no, we want more, we want less, but we have to start someplace. And can I ask the commission to consider if we do one meeting for each phase in a region, that gives us 27 meetings. If we'd like to bump it up to at least 4 meetings per region, we're at 36 and so on. So would the commissioners like to discuss a potential number to look at for public input hearings?
Sorry. Let's jump in first this time. The only thing that as I was trying to review this and understand, having not been in on the subcommittee meeting, so perhaps this was addressed there, but I'm not entirely sure. I guess I was expecting the technical committee to come forward and present to us that regional approach and help us understand how that was created and why that's the best 9-region approach is the best way to tackle this.
I may have Karen address that since it was part of the methodology that was in there. I think part of it was just on an overall was to try and get a handle on a regional approach from which within that region we can move around to make sure we try and get the geographic diversity. But I'll have Karen discuss the methodology.
Well, there are 2 ways of going about this. I mean, one, I could bring back the presentation that I gave yesterday, the PowerPoint. I think you actually have it. I don't know if you can. Or I can just walk you through it. You have all the supporting documents, basically. So,
may I ask, is this presentation available or going to be available for the public view? I'm concerned that the public understand if we were to take a vote on a 9-region concept and all of that. I want to make sure that everybody understands, including myself, why we chose, a 9-region concept.
But I'm sorry, Commissioner Chairman Ward. This was discussed in the subcommittee meeting yesterday.
Correct.
Fully, and it was a public hearing. I'm not certain why we would be asking Ms. McDonald to go through. I did sit in for a brief period of time, and I understand where these concepts come from, but I don't know if it's an efficient use of this full commission's time for something that she's completely presented to the public yesterday in a subcommittee. I certainly appreciate your question. I know how she got to the 9 because I sat in on it, but I thought the idea was to accept reporting from subcommittees rather than having them reiterate everything that was already presented by a consultant or expert that spoke at a subcommittee meeting.
I think that's a great point, and I thank you for raising it, Commissioner Wilkins-Weber. However, we have to vote on that, and I think that it's a fair question to ask to have at least a basic understanding of what's what data drives that drives to make that decision. If I was asked why did I vote for a 9-region concept as opposed to a 10-region concept, I could not answer that question.
And can I suggest that for the sake of, again, getting the ball started, that we consider 9. We're not locking ourselves into 9, but if we start with 9 as an overarching for regions and any consultants came back with us with a proposal of scheduled meetings based on these 9 regions, and we took a look at it and said, you know what, we're really missing this over here. Let's add an extra region. But I think we have to start somewhere, so the point was to start with 9.
Commissioner Dye.
Ms. McDonald, could you in 1 minute tell us why there are 9 regions?
Even up to 5 minutes, I think we could agree.
Okay. Well, I can summarize it really quickly. The handout that I passed out earlier, let me just walk you through it. So first, there's this document that says Draft 21011. So that's basically the document that describes both approaches. One is the approach to locate the educational background meetings and where they might go. And that's basically the methodology that we use to, again, locate the regional, the redistricting assistance sites for the Irvine centers, or the Irvine funded centers. That methodology is in Appendix 1, and the map that refers to it is in Appendix 2. Okay? Now the question is 9 regions. Now that is a different methodology. So now I would refer you to Appendix 3 and the map that is entitled Appendix 4. Okay? So what I'm going to summarize right now is Appendix 3 very quickly, and it is really described in the first document. Again, that's entitled Draft 21011. For these input hearings, as I titled them in this particular document, we tried to come up with a methodology that would incorporate your desire, the Commission's desire, to reach populations that had previously not necessarily been engaged in the redistricting process. And you recall this came out of the idea of perhaps doing 50 meetings out in various areas in California. And then, one of the locations that was specifically outlined was, I think, Susanville and then also Eureka. And we also considered some geographic regions and commonalities in just, organizing these regions. So these regions are really organizing units. And to go one step further, these regions can further on or later on also be used to organize line drawing activities. So I really took a bit of a comprehensive approach here, just to save some time and money because both are short. So really you shouldn't look at these in terms of set in stone. Really look at them as organizing units. You could look at the most northern region, which is Region 8, I believe, Region 9. I think Region 9. And then you could envision perhaps holding your first public input hearing maybe up in Eureka, because that's where some of you would like to go. And, have that first one there, but then the next time you go back, go someplace else in that particular region, and perhaps if we go back the second time, we will already have some census data, so we know where the lines are going to fall. So then there's going to be an interaction with you, because many of you know these areas very well. And a suggestion of where the specific hearing location should be, and then that should go to the outreach consultants. They will find us a spot to actually do that, and then we collect input. So that's really how I was thinking, or how we were thinking about this particular approach. So don't, I'm not suggesting that these are communities of interest, that there's anything else other than it's an organizing unit. It makes a lot of sense. We have to start someplace. It gives us flexibility, and it enables you to do what you stated to me you wanted to do. And everything in detail is in these appendices, and I think that's about. If you have questions, and I'll go into those.
Thank you, Karen. It's very helpful.
I don't have a question. I just have a comment. I think that as long as we can move around the meetings, and that's sort of, at this point, the concept, that I think going with the 9 region at this point is a useful thing, because I do think we have to move the ball down the field. And so I would be comfortable that we direct staff to come up with a hard schedule of meeting this plan. Perhaps the location may be more difficult, but in terms of we're going to be in District 3 on these dates, and then we'll leave it to where that might be, is it for a later date. I think the hard schedule for all of us, the sooner we know, the better chance we have of being able to make more meetings rather than fewer.
Commissioner DiGiulio?
And just the logistics, we wouldn't be tasking staff to do it, we'd be tasking the consultants. Okay, just the logistics, because I see staff over there going. So.
Connie.
I would actually be interested in seeing both the 27 meeting and the 36 meeting approach. That's something that I think is easily asked for the consultants to prepare a couple options for us.
May I add to that I was actually also suggesting that you schedule one hearing in addition for statewide groups.
Yeah.
Okay, and that, I don't know if you want to do that in Sacramento or where, but that could also be scheduled. I think it's really important to schedule at least, one or two of these hearings in each region well in advance so that the public can prepare to actually see you at that point and have their testimony ready for you.
Would it be useful to plan two, one in Northern California, one in Southern? For the statewide groups?
The statewide? Well, if you think about the way I am right now, and if you don't want to add too many hearings, then I would say do one in each phase at minimum. And then you could, of course, also, since then California is your region, then you can also jump around.
So building off of that piece of feedback, I'd like to redirect commissioners to the agenda that was posted, which is our agenda for our February 23rd through 27th meeting in Sacramento. It was given to you, I think, late this morning. If you turn to the back page, anticipating that this might be a direction that we'd want to take as a commission, I went ahead and took the liberty, working with Vice Commissioner Filkins-Weber for that meeting, to actually post an opportunity to do a commission session to receive information on efforts to educate the public on redistricting. Now, the thinking behind this would be that this would be an opportunity for us to go ahead and get started on one of these listening sessions, and that we will already be in Sacramento. We have an excellent space that's being provided to us there by the legislature. The objective of the session would be to give commissioners a general understanding of the redistricting education and outreach done by citizen-based organizations and groups statewide, and the plans of those entities for additional outreach in the future. The goal of this session would not be to receive formal communities of interest testimony. Those are currently being scheduled, of course, as we've just directed staff to work on, our consultants to work on various proposals, and will be held across the state. With the posting of the agenda, groups and organizations are invited to give presentations to the commission, and this would offer two different opportunities. One would be that groups who have a statewide interest in redistricting could schedule to make a presentation to the commission as a group on behalf of a larger number of community members, and we would also provide the opportunity for individuals who are interested, who have statewide feedback and perspectives, to weigh in. So this is a placeholder. It's an option that's there. We do have the facilities there. We do have working relationships now with consultants who could actually help us pull this off, and I wanted to put it on the table so that when we come out of session here, we are able to have a firm decision on whether we're going to move forward with this particular outreach meeting on February 26th.
So thank you for pointing that out, Vice Chair. Why don't we consider that as a commission and revisit it when we discuss scheduling and calendaring towards the close of business tomorrow? And we can further define and make that happen. Commissioner DiGiulio, can you?
I just was curious as to whether there was other discussion. Otherwise, I would present a motion to say that we would like to have both at least the 27 and 36 format number of meetings for the public input hearing to be. Let me rephrase this. I'd like to have a motion that we ask consultants to present options for both the 27 and 36 meetings, plus I would say it was a recommendation for at least three statewide meetings.
Second.
Point of order, we already have a motion on the floor about the 9-region approach.
I'll second that motion for that hadn't gotten a second yet. Had it? Yeah, it was already. Oh, it was seconded? Oh.
Yeah, we were just looking for a restating of the motion. So was that?
Did we get a second, Janice? Okay, so we have a second now.
Yeah. I second Commissioner Forbes' motion.
Was it
Commissioner DeGiulio's
I'll restate the motion.
It was Commissioner DeGiulio's motion. Oh, there was a
okay,
second.
so there's a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded by both Commissioner Blanco and Commissioner Forbes. And I'm asking, is there any further panel debate?
Which motion?
Yeah.
I understood that there was a motion made by Commissioner DeGiulio to go with 9 regions.
I'm sorry.
I don't know whether there was a second to that
I'm sorry,
or not.
I got ahead of myself, so I'd like to go back to the original for a motion for the 9-region approach for the public input hearings.
So let's go ahead and for complete clarity's sake, and I see Janice, I'm sorry, with her hand up. Let's go ahead and have a statement of exactly what the motion is right now, and we'll confirm the seconds, and then we're going to vote on this.
Okay, the motion is to approve in concept the 9-region approach for the public input hearings.
Okay. That was your second, correct? Commissioner Blanco? Okay. Commissioner Forbes, that's your second? Thank you. Okay. Any further panel debate on that? Commissioner?
Well, I can either offer a friendly amendment, which is to add the other stuff you had, the other suggested motion, or we can do a separate motion, which is to include the statewide input hearings as well, which I think is not in your original motion. So I'd offer that as a friendly amendment, or a later motion, whichever.
The amendment is noted. Could you please state that amendment so that they can?
Propose that the motion be amended to include language that at least one statewide input hearing be conducted by the commission.
I think actually that was a part of the second motion that I made, which was the 27 versus 36. So my first motion was simply to approve the 9 regions.
Okay. Again, procedure, whatever gets it on.
And the second motion was to, let's stay there.
Right now, we have, so is there a second to that amendment? Not seeing any second, then we're going to go.
I'm sorry. I'll second. It was an amendment to the motion, and that's why I would second.
Okay, so we have a second to the amended motion that we're going to approach a 9-region concept for public outreach. And was it one or at least one?
At least one.
At least one statewide meeting. Yeah. Okay. Any further panel discussion on this motion? Okay.
Commissioner Anchetta, do you want to clarify this was for statewide groups, as was suggested by Ms. McDonald, or what did you mean by one additional public input meeting, since they're all input meetings?
Thank you. Let me clarify that. And I will rely on maybe more specifically, that there be at least one input hearing scheduled during each phase that focuses specifically on statewide issues that are not specific to any one region.
So noted. Any other panel discussion? Okay, at this point, we'll go ahead and open the microphone for public comment on strictly the motion on the floor of a 9-region approach to public outreach and at least one statewide outreach meeting. Sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Bruce Campbell. This 9-region approach doesn't acknowledge the distinct community of interest on the North Coast and the physiographic province and all, and also Mr. Ontai's handout had North Coastal as one of 6 districts, and all of a sudden District 9 Region 9 is massive, and are we to sort of assume that there'll be a somewhat similar number of hearings in tiny Orange County as in this massive Region 9? So I don't care for it.
Thank you for your comment.
Doug Johnson from the Rhodes Institute. If I may just ask a clarifying question on the statewide issues forum, and I think I know where the commission is, but I just wanted to get it for the public. Is the goal that if someone wants to talk at that hearing about a local regional issue, the commission won't hear it? Or are you just trying to say that will be the focus of that hearing? So, thanks.
Let the subcommittee clarify that after we're done with public comment. Any further public comment on this issue? Okay. No one else approaching the microphone. We'll close that. And would the subcommittee like to clarify what the statewide meeting might entail or exclude?
Do we need to discuss that now, or should?
No, I just wanted you to make a clarifying statement. As I understood, the statewide meeting is open to anyone. It was just an invitation for statewide groups.
It would be that would be the primary focus, but it wouldn't be at the exclusion of other groups.
Excellent. Okay. Any more panel discussion on this matter? Okay, let's take a vote. If all in favor, raise your hand and say yes, please. Yes. Yes. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion's passed. Commissioner DiGiulio?
The only other thing would be the second part of that motion, which I think we were discussing earlier, was to give the parameters and concept for a 27 and 36 type of structure for public input hearings that, again, we can go forward with actually having an outline, a schedule of meetings based on 27 or 36 public input hearings for our review at a later date.
I'm sorry to be a stickler on this, but I think there's a point of order because Commissioner Anchetta actually made an amendment to add so we were voting on the amendment, actually. So we actually need to vote on the full motion now.
Can I have a restatement of the motion on the floor?
Commissioner Anchetta? Your amendment. Yeah.
No, we just passed the amended motion. That's what yeah.
We're back to the original motion
We'll go back to the original motion.
So, would you like to state the full motion with Commissioner Anchetta's motion, just to be clear?
We're talking about the 9 regions?
Yes.
With the amendment.
Yes, with the amendment.
That we approve a 9 regional approach for the public input hearings with the amendment to include the statewide meetings.
That was voted on and passed. I think there's a original motion that's still on the floor that you can feel free to withdraw and move forward.
Okay. I would say just the 9. Okay, the original was just simply the 9 regions.
No.
And that was seconded.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to vote or withdraw on that motion?
We have to vote on it.
We have to vote on it. Okay. That's right.
Yes, just chair the.
Okay. The way I understood it is when we didn't just vote on the amendment, though. When we stated the motion that we were voting on, we wrapped it all into one. So perhaps that was my error, but it's already passed. So I don't think we need to re-vote on because I made an error and didn't separate out the amendment first. I don't believe that we need to go ahead and.
Well, I actually think we do.
I think procedurally we voted on the motion for the amendment, and that got added to the original motion. So now we have the original motion with the amendment on the table.
Do have to vote on it.
Could you restate the motion for us, please, Commissioner Dye?
As I understand it, the motion was to vote on the concept of a 9-region approach, and to add, and we only voted on the amendment, which was to add a statewide issues meeting in each of the regions. That's what we voted on.
May I ask staff to, Janice, what did you record as our vote?
My understanding was that the amended motion was wrapped into the original motion, and that was voted on and passed.
As stated, I think 3 times, right?
Yes.
Right. We can't just wrap it, though. You have to formally amend a motion. So we voted on the amendment, and that was to add the statewide meeting in each one. Now we're back to the original motion, which has now been amended.
I second it. Any further comment on this motion? Okay. I'd like to open up to the public at this time.
I might suggest to the Commission that when you have confusion about what the motion on the floor is, perhaps the reporter can read back the original motion rather than all of the machinations you've just gone through. In the discussion of the motion, there was also the issue raised of whether you're going to have 27 or 36 or 48 possible sessions, and I don't think that was addressed in subsequent discussion, although I think it was part of the original motion, which should be in the record. And as to that issue of 27 or 36 or 48, an earlier public comment talked about the gigantic Region 9, and I would add Region 6 and the northern half of Region 2. For some of these huge geographic areas, you may not want to tie yourself to a particular number of sessions in those regions. I'm guessing that Region 9 could easily call for 4 or more sessions simply because of the huge geographic area and the geographic separation with mountains from coastal and so forth and so on. So I don't know where you want to take it from there, but I think you perhaps need to have a basis to go back and recall what the original motion was, because the motion seemed to be restated differently each time that you asked for a recap.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that.
Maybe I could clarify. I think we had this confusion, so we went back and simply started with a 9-region approach to try and get that. That was a motion for 9 regions, and then we were going to, hence the amendment to that, and then we were going to return back to the actual number once we're finished with this conversation.
We have another comment?
I wonder if it's possible to, like the term several, I think doesn't that mean like 2 to somewhere around 6 or 7? So it seems like that would encompass, and it wouldn't be tied to a certain number in various regions. So it's like to be specific, but that's sort of vague yet encompassing.
Very good. Thank you for your comment. Okay, at this time, I would like to, seeing no one else approaching the microphone, put this motion to vote. All in favor of the motion on the floor, please raise your hand and say yes. Yes. All opposed? Any abstention? And the motion is moved.
Mr. Chair.
Julio.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Let me just make a comment at this time, and that is that I think you're doing a great job in herding cats.
Thank you.
So, because, and I would ask the public to be patient with us because, yes, it gets awkward at times, but I think as a commission, we're committed to the mission. And if it means that we extend our day into the evening to make sure that we take care of the business, that's what we do. But ultimately, we're trying to lay the brick foundation for a very solid process in the future. And it's all about serving the public. And I was just, I was watching you and thinking, take a deep breath, brother. Because, it is, sitting in that chair is not an easy thing to do, and I appreciate your work.
Oh, no problem at all. No, the debate is fantastic and well needed. You're right. Commissioner DiGiulio.
I think just lastly, the one last thing, as I understand, would be helpful. I'm sorry. In terms of getting some parameters, again, for the consultants to work with, would be the addressing the number, a starting point for the number of public input hearings. And so I would like to, if the commissioners have any feedback in regards to 27 versus 36, or if we should just move to a motion to look at those 2 starting points.
No, I was just going to echo the comments made by Commissioner Geary that the public be very patient with us. It's been a long night, and as I'm listening to Commissioner DiGiulio, I just want to share this, that with my fellow commissioners that she was up to 3 o'clock this morning putting these notes together. So bear with her.
She asked for a comment on the 27 versus the 36. I think the initial idea was to try and come up with a schedule for both, and just in my opinion, that for the sake of the public concerned about some of these larger regions, that does not preclude us from down the road adding. But for the purposes of asking our staff to work over the next 2 weeks with the consultants, that I would support the 27 and 36 as alternates.
I just have one question, and you certainly may have addressed this. As I understand it, you're talking about one meeting per phase, 3 meetings per region. That gets you to the 27. What's the additional 4th meeting for in these regions?
I think it was just the understanding that, particularly as we get into the nitty-gritty, that there may be a need for at least going back twice in phase 2, so that gives you an option of 4 meetings. So it's just building anticipation that at the bare minimum we've asked to go in 3 times, but let's look at an option that gives us 4, and knowing, I think if we try and provide a condensed schedule, then maybe we can have options to add more later on.
Okay, so it's not just a particular region, a special region meeting, that 4th one, it's just the possibility of still accepting further input because you would find that you needed it. It's not a special 4th meeting.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, if I may. Yeah, it's really just designed to give you some flexibility, because once we know which way the lines are going to be moving, you may see the need to hold 5 or so, or 6 even hearings in some of these like organizing units, but in others you may just have to hold 1 because there's not that much public input, and the issues are pretty clear, and everybody is just ecstatic about the lines that you're going to be proposing. So,
Commissioner,
it does happen.
Commissioner Ward?
I have a clarification as well, which is in regards to the statewide input hearing. So if we were to say that we're going to see a proposal with 27 meetings as one approach, it would actually be 27 plus 3?
Correct. I'm sorry. Yes, those would be for the baseline for the regional approach ones, and I would like to add that there'd be at least 3 more meetings for the state at the statewide level for each phase.
Thank you.
And I guess I'm not sure how to do this in terms of planning dates, which is what people want to start doing. But I'm a little concerned with locking us into 36 as a cap, because I think that. So
I'm sorry. That would be the starting point.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that, because I think it is possible one region will be will need a lot to go back twice or 3 times. So I want to just clarify that it's not a cap.
It's the bottom.
May I suggest a bio break?
Absolutely. Let's keep it to 5 minutes, and we'll re-adjourn in 5 minutes.